And I think
So there you go. That's what Trump is saying about all of this. And this is a pretty extraordinary development as well. Let me put this up on the screen here. So our own intel, this is the New York Times report that Trump is referring to here. There was clearly a leak from the intel community saying preliminary classified findings indicate the attack sealed off the entrances to two facilities, but did not collapse their underground buildings. I'll read you a little bit of this. Preliminary classified U.S. report says the American bombing of 3 nuclear sites in Iran set back the country's nuclear program by only a few months, according to officials familiar with the findings. The strike sealed off the entrances to 2 of the facilities, did not collapse their underground buildings. Before the attack, U.S. intel agencies had said if Iran tried to rush to making a bomb, it would take about 3 months. After the U.S. bombing run and days of attacks by the Israeli Air Force, the report by the Defense Intelligence Agency now estimated the program had been delayed, but by less than 6 months. That report also said much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strikes, which destroyed little of the nuclear material. Iran may have moved some of that to secret locations. I suspect based on publicly available satellite information and other analyses of people who know a lot more about this than I do, I suspect that assessment is in fact correct. But also I strongly suspect that the people who are leaking this assessment of saying, like, what are you talking about? You obliterated these nuclear sites. You didn't. You barely accomplished anything. They moved all of the enriched uranium beforehand because they had such a heads up here. And you didn't even destroy these facilities. And oh, by the way, there are other facilities. So yeah, you set them back a little bit, but ultimately not that much. I am quite sure the people who are leaking that assessment are people who want us to go back to war directly with Iran. So the information they're putting out, which again, I believe is accurate based on what we know publicly of, what we were and weren't able to accomplish with these bombs that we foolishly dropped on Iran. They're trying to say, listen, you're claiming victory. You're claiming that Iran can no longer pursue a nuclear weapon. You, President Trump, have laid down, foolishly again, a red line saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. You didn't accomplish that. So they're trying to push a continued logic to war. Now, this is all Trump's own fault because we've all been saying, myself, Sagar, Emily Ryan, like Dave Smith, all, plenty of people who, and plenty of people probably within his own administration as well, the Steve Bannons and the Tucker Carlsons of the world have been saying, no, if you actually want to try to prevent Iran from racing towards a nuclear weapon, you've just done the worst possible thing. The best thing you could have done is remain in diplomatic negotiations and be able to pursue an actual diplomatic settlement like, the JCPOA that Trump got out of in his first administration. So by bombing them, he has created more logic for them now to pursue a nuclear weapon and made that much more likely. So he has given ammunition to the hawks and the neocons who want to keep this war going and want us to fully commit to total war with Iran. So this leaked intel report, this is the next sort of salvo from that group. Again, I think it's accurate. I think he's lying when he says these were completely obliterated, and is just trying to be able to claim a victory. And so what they're trying to do is give ammunition to those who say, no, you did not destroy the nuclear weapons program. You yourself said they can't have a nuke. So that would mean you have to go back to bombing them. You have to re-engage in this conflict and, and get more fully invested in directly using bombs, destroying the Iranian capability, because Trump himself really blew up the possibility of a diplomatic, very likely destroy the possibility of a diplomatic resolution at this time. So the next move from Trump, and this is again, absolutely extraordinary. This is from Barack Ravid. He says the White House sent to reporters a statement by the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission that claims U.S. strike on Fordo destroyed the site's critical infrastructure, rendered the enrichment facility inoperable. Ravid goes on accurately to state, this is a highly unusual case of the White House releasing a statement on behalf of an Israeli security agency. The statement was not distributed to the Israeli or international media by the Prime Minister's office, which is responsible for the Atomic Energy Commission's press. So just like the U.S. Trump relied on the Israeli assessment that the Iranians were actively pursuing a nuclear weapon, discarding our own intelligence community, discarding the assessment of the IAEA, the international body that was monitoring this. He relied on the Israelis convincing him, no, I promise they were pursuing a nuclear weapon. That's why you have to bomb. Now you have the president sharing not our own intelligence community assessment of what happened here. Again, the Israelis' assessment of what happened here. Just absolutely extraordinary and so unusual what is going on. In the same time, there's a lot of indications that the Iranians were able to strike significant blows against Israel. Let me just show you a little bit of the Iranians after this quote-unquote ceasefire, however long this holds or whatever it means at the moment. There were a lot of Iranians who were out in the street. You can see them celebrating here because, if you think about it from their perspective, they took much more, very likely, although it's kind of difficult to tell, they took much more significant blows, certainly in terms of the death toll and the infrastructure toll, than the Israelis did. But the Israelis' goal was regime collapse and regime change. Israelis' goal was to destroy the Iranian nation. The Iranian nation was not destroyed. The government is probably actually stronger and enjoys more credibility based on the reports we've gotten with the people. So from that perspective, the Iranians feel like they've achieved a success because they were able to exact enough damage on the Israelis that the Israelis kind of had to take this ceasefire and at least take a break. Now, I'm very skeptical that this is going to be an end to the conflict because I don't think Bibi Netanyahu woke up today and was like, you know what, Iran let's live and let live. My multi-decade goal of destroying this country, I'm all finished with that. I'm all through. And you can see that from the, the leaked intel report is an indication that the people who want more war, they are still going to work and they have some tools and some leverage because of the corner Trump has backed himself into in a lot of respects. They still have some leverage to try to effectuate their outcome of total and complete war. So the Iranians feel actually that they have something to celebrate right now because they feel like they were able to do enough damage to Israel that's what created the compelling reason for Israel to need to regroup. We had the reports that there were low on interceptors. The military sensors really kicked in hard to keep us from seeing how widespread the extent of the damage was. But let me go ahead and show you this. President Trump himself admitted that the Israelis took quite significant damage. Let me go ahead and play this for you as well. This is also from that NATO summit.
Hey, Iran, look, they've got a country and they've got oil and they're very smart people and they can come back. Israel got hit very hard, especially the last couple of days. Israel was hit really hard. Those ballistic missiles, boy, they took out a lot of buildings. And they've been great. Bibi Netanyahu should be very proud of himself. And they've really been great.
So he says there that Israel was hit very hard. Steve Bannon echoed a similar sentiment and explained, and I think he's right about this, explained that the part of the reason for the ceasefire right now is that Israel needed to be saved, in his words. Let me go ahead and play for you what he had to say.
Yesterday took this ceasefire was as much to save Israel. That's the hidden story here. They bit off way more than they could chew. They were played out as far. Yesterday was a brutal day for the citizens of Israel. Took horrible incomings, particularly in Tel Aviv, and I guess Beersheba also. They needed this because they're running out of defensive ammunition. And President Trump stepped in there with the help of Qatar. Look, we've come a long way since 7 years ago when Qatar, would not work with us on stopping the financing of Islamic terrorism, the financing of it. And they come a long way. They've stepped in the middle of the situation in Gaza, and they stepped in the middle here, and President Trump is going out of his way to praise them. And he's not going out of his way to praise Netanyahu's government, which I think is getting to be an issue.
So pretty interesting comments there. He said, the ceasefire really was to save the Israelis. Very counter the media narrative, but as I said, I think there's something to that. That's not to say that especially the initial Israeli onslaught in Iran was quite devastating. The number of officials who they were able to assassinate, the amount of infrastructure they were able to destroy. But it's also very clear they were depending on, they could not accomplish their objectives, and they still can't accomplish their objectives, which are regime collapse, without the assistance of the United States. And so we were reading all these reports from Wall Street Journal and other places that as this war went on, it was a race between, okay, how many missiles do the Iranians have, and how many interceptors do the Israelis have? And some of the tension between, Israelis was spilling out into the public. At the amount of damage that the Iranians were able to, effectuate within Israel. You had citizens who, of course, are, having to go into underground bunkers every day. Life is completely disrupted. The airport is completely closed. And so I do think that the reason why Israel was willing to accept this ceasefire at this point was a chance to regroup. Now, that doesn't mean they're done. Far from it. I guarantee you Netanyahu is scheming right now how to get this thing kicked off again. And those are incredibly powerful forces. We also don't have a track record of Donald Trump in any way consistently standing up to Israel at all. In fact, I think you should continue to be, maybe he's earnest in his frustration with Netanyahu, we don't know, but it's also possible that this is also theater, because we've seen theater deployed in the service of furthering this conflict directly from Donald Trump before. So in any case, where we are this morning is Trump is very upset at the leaks from the neocons about the assessment that the nuclear sites were not destroyed. He is using Israeli intelligence to try to, assert that no, it accomplished the goals. But because of the way that he has backed himself into a corner of destroying his own diplomatic negotiations, putting in place a hard red line of Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, he's left himself vulnerable to these sorts of manipulations to try to get this thing kicked off again. And that's assuming that he himself doesn't share the goal of the Israelis of getting back into this conflict after some sort of a pause, which I don't think we can put off the table either. The last piece that I wanted to share with you is we're getting the first polling in about how popular Trump bombing these Iranian nuclear sites ultimately was. I will tell you, with the Republican base and specifically with the MAGA base, it's now that Trump did it, it's very popular. 94% of MAGA-aligned Republicans say they support the strikes, even though before Trump did it, the numbers were not that great for, they were still kind of favorable, but pretty mixed. Once Trump did it, you now have 94% of self-identified MAGA Republicans who are like, oh, Trump did it, so it must be great. Broadly, though, the public, much less supportive. And let me go ahead and play this Harry Enton clip, and then I'll tell you a little bit on the other side why I think this is actually pretty extraordinary that these numbers, even initially, are as low as they are.
Yeah, these things are moving quite quickly, but these are initial readings, and I will say from a historical perspective, I am surprised that the net approval rating is so low on these strikes, and it's in two different polls. It's our CNN SSRS poll, 12 points underwater, 1 thumbs down. How about the Reuters Ipsos poll? Look at that, the exact same reading, -9 points underwater. 2 thumbs down. And why am I so surprised from a historical perspective? Because usually airstrikes rate fairly highly. What are we talking about? Let's go back through the time machine. Net approval of U.S. airstrikes. You see it here, Iran, -11 points underwater on the average. Compare it to ISIS back in 2014. 58 points in the positive direction. So this is a nearly 70-point difference. That is why I'm so surprised from a historical perspective, because normally these airstrikes rate quite highly, but this one, you go back through history, it rates as the lowest that I could possibly find on the historical record.
And that is exactly why it surprised me as well, and why I was wrong, somewhat wrong in my assessment of what the popularity of these attacks would be. I was concerned that actually, certainly I knew the Republicans would support it, and they do, but I thought some significant chunk of independents would as well, simply because throughout my life, people in this country have supported bombing other nations, and that's just the unfortunate fact. The propaganda machine ramps up. People get the sense that this is going to be mission accomplished, that it's going to be quick and easy and painless, and we're going to accomplish whatever goal we're being sold at the time. And so at least in the very early days, they're usually, as Harry Enton points out there's usually pretty broad support. The fact that there's not really is so noteworthy, so incredibly noteworthy. I would attribute it to a few things. number one, there was so little effort at a propaganda campaign buildup. You know, it just was like all of a sudden we're supposed to be kind of out of nowhere convinced that what was going on in Iran was existential over the assessment that we got from our own intel community just a few months ago. I mean, I do think that that testimony from Tulsi Gabbard, which was played everywhere, where she's saying, no, very clearly, no, our assessment continues to be they're not pursuing a nuclear weapon. I think that really undercut the very haphazard and unimpressive propaganda efforts that came out of the Trump administration to try to justify this. So I think that's part of it. I think the fact that you now have this much more robust independent media landscape is another significant part of it, where it's just, if you're going to manufacture consent, you're going to have to do a lot more work than they were ultimately able to do. And so people just weren't really buying that this was necessary right now, that this was going to accomplish the goals, that this wasn't going to create incredible, tremendous risks. And then a third factor is just, most of the country is very wary, understandably so, of getting involved in some new Middle Eastern quagmire, regime change, disastrous boondoggle. So maybe most of the elites in this country haven't learned the lesson. But according to these numbers, majority of independents and Democrats certainly have learned the lesson and are not willing to gamble the way that President Trump really did with these strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, where we are today, there's, a possibility that things quiet down for a while. Again, I'm very skeptical, and I know Saagar is also very skeptical that this is the end and it's wrapped up in peace forever, as Trump says. But we're also very fortunate that the Iranians decided, in response to our dropping these, a dozen giant bunker buster 30,000-pound bombs on one of their key nuclear sites and attacking 2 other key nuclear sites, that their response to that was so muted and so theatrical. It was just meant to be a show of, hey, we could get you in Qatar at your, largest airbase in the region, but we're going to tell you in advance to make sure there's no damage, so that there's a possibility of some sort of a de-escalatory off-ramp. Now, I think the logic of the Israelis, again, in agreeing to this ceasefire in this moment, is not because they want the war to be over. It's not because they feel they've accomplished their objectives. Their objectives are regime change or regime collapse. That obviously hasn't been achieved. It's because they needed to regroup, as Trump himself seems to indicate, as Steve Bannon says there. Israel needed a chance to regroup so that they could continue a sort of phased approach. But their desire to destroy this regime has not ebbed. They still continue to be incredibly powerful within this administration, as we saw in the first Trump administration as well. And so, my fear is that right now this is far from over. There are also some reports, and I want to see this confirmed in more places, that the Iranians, are withdrawing from the nuclear oversight regime, which, I'm not the only one. John Mearsheimer will tell you this, Jeffrey Sachs will tell you this, anyone who's looking at this from an objective perspective will tell you that what we have done has created all the incentive in the world for the Iranians now to develop nuclear weapons outside of an inspections regime, in the same way, by the way, that the Israelis did, and will create a similar logic for other countries around the world. So we already have some early indications that that's exactly the direction that they're moving in. So that's what I've got for you this morning. Saagar and I'll be back with a regular full show tomorrow. We've already got some fantastic guests booked. I'm excited to bring that to you. We'll have a full breakdown of all the latest with regard to Iran. I'm sure we'll continue to cover. There's been a delicious meltdown over Zoran's victory, both from the Morning Joe types who are, there's some real hard coping on the Democratic side. The Republicans are losing their minds. You've got these psycho groups, Zionist groups like Beitar worldwide, is saying that the Jews must evacuate New York City. Based on the margin of victory here, I'm quite confident that Zoran probably won Jewish voters overall in New York City. So anyway, there's so much to talk about with that race, continuing to talk about the what it's going to mean for the future and what the reaction has been. So I'm sure we'll have more of that for you as well. In the meantime, guys, enjoy your day. Thank you for your support, and I will see you soon.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show. Help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.
Dark power, mine to claim. My courage is rewarded. This will carry me through. Yes. My courage is rewarded. Yes, this will carry me through. rewarded.
This is gonna be the one. There's no way it's not. There's no way. We can get a little more move speed, maybe another jump. Who knows?
Pain and power, inseparable.
Let's just sit here for a second and think about it. Sit there. Just let it go. Just think about the whirlwind of life. It's really a meditation game, more than anything. The game is actually not about skill. It's about patience. It's about resolve. It's about execution. It's not really about execution that much. Not bullshitting a lot. Bullshitting a lot. Look at all that juice. It's triple juice. Triple Juice Wednesday. Go. It's embarrassing when you don't count the dots in your Lewis structures, but hey, you recover. You recover from there. It'll be again. It'll be good. Damn it.
Strength comes at a price.
Alright, let's sit here and chill on it for a second. Chill on it, 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 chill on it. Whoa.
This will carry me through.
I would like to get the hundo crit, please. Give me the mega hundo.
Dark power, mine to claim.
I think we're almost there. I'll be there. I'll be there.
Strength comes at a price.
We go. We win. We're gonna win the game. Everybody's gonna think it's fucking crazy how you won the game at this point. Whoa. Whoa.
My courage is rewarded.
Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Just more. Just more power. That's all I need is more power. There's no way to invalidate that it's all a simulation. Is that a cop out of epic proportions? Probably.
Yes, this will carry me through.
More power! Let the enemies come to you. I would like my level now, please. Rage.
Pain and power inseparable.
I'm consumed by rage, blinded. I want to kill all of them. My alarm's going off. No!
Dark power, mine to claim. The Void King's magic is fading. I can feel it.
Alright. Let's make it happen. I'm gonna go grab my alarm so it's fucking...
One door, one king, one last kill. Let's finish this.
Let's go. I'm so dead.
Weaver. Oathbreaker. How long have you been corrupted?
I am no traitor, barbarian. Only able to see what you could not. We were never meant to contain the Great Void. We were meant to belong to it.
Faithless coward. First I will end your treachery, and then destroy the Void King.
Faithless biatch.
Stubborn, as always.
It's the one.
Come, barbarian. I will show you the true depths of absolute power.
We're about to find out right now. Oh my god. Please kill her. Please kill her. Please kill her. Please.
No one escapes.
It was so close.